Hi, welcome back to Ribbon Candy Hooking. I'm Deanna, and I thought I would do another video today about a subject that I think a lot of people are interested in and maybe beginners don't know how to do yet, and that is transferring your pattern onto your backing fabric. So I thought let's show how to do that in a video, make it really simple and straightforward so you can work on transferring your own designs or paper designs depending on what you'd like to do. So when you are looking at an ad for buying a pattern online, it often says something like, do you want monk's cloth? Do you want linen? Do you want Scottish burlap? Or do you want paper? And if you get paper, of course, you're responsible for transferring it yourself onto your whatever backing fabric you have already that you've already chosen. So that's the part that sometimes can get people, if you don't know how to transfer your stuff the easiest way and inexpensively onto your backing fabric, because you don't want to, obviously backing fabric is not cheap and you don't want to waste it. So you want to make sure that you're getting a good transfer, you're getting a good design that you can see well and really beef up with your Sharpie to make nice and dark, and you can start working on it right away. So let's see how to do that. I will say two of the ways that people do this already without any sort of new technique being introduced, and this is not a new technique, this is tracing. But a lot of people just do it by putting a design up on your window with the backing fabric and tracing it. Lots and lots of tape and lining things up, and that can go well as long as you're really careful to make sure your border is squared along the lines of your burlap or your linen or your monk's cloth or whatever. That can work. I really personally hate working at an angle, like a right angle, like vertically like this, because it's such a neck and back killer. But it does work. Using outdoor light and a glass window does work. It also does work using a light box. So I have a light box downstairs that I used to use, and I just find myself never using it anymore. But a light box is like a big plexiglass fronted, slanted, almost like an old-fashioned writing desk, like an antique writing desk on the angle of an architect's table or a drafting table. That can work too. It has bars of fluorescent lights in it, and you will get light, but you might not get enough light for whatever background fabric you have, the backing. So I'm going to show you the thing that is the most straightforward, and I think in general the most professional way of transferring a pattern, and that is with tracing. So as an example, last night my daughter drew a couple little pictures, and this was one of them. It's a pirate. But she was insistent that I put the pirate inside this old clock case that I have a couple of them hanging around the house. And so during just one episode of Miss Marple, not even because this is such a small piece, I hooked this for her. So I traced it really quickly with the technique I'm about to show you, and hooked it into a circle, and then I put it on my backing and everything. And this is a clock case. Of course, the first thing I did was trace the hole and figure out the size with the circle, and then do my drawing. I copied her drawing with her careful scrutiny that I was not screwing it up, and put it on the backing fabric the way I'm about to show you. And when I was finished, I literally just folded it over and stitched it, like steamed it, pressed it, blocked it, pressed it really well, stretched it a little bit, and sewed it a straight line down here. And now I've got these cardboard things I haven't attached yet, that this is like a unique backing to a clock. And whatever you're trying to fit your thing into, whether it's just a rectangular frame, you're just tracing the outline of the frame so you have the size of the piece you will finish. This for me was just different because it was a circle and it was very easy to back. But this is what I did last night. This is a little like right before bedtime project. So the kicker is, as usual, there's two clocks. And so this is the second clock, and this is her second drawing that she's going to watch me like a hawk a second time and micromanage me while I do this design. So I've already blown up this design. I did it with my projector and the computer. The first thing I did with my clock case, maybe you have an empty clock case sitting around, maybe you just have a frame, or maybe you're not even going to do this part of the technique. But I literally put it down, and you can't see from here, but traced the circle. Boom, with my pencil, and then I had the shape. So I'm ready to go. So I got we'll do this on another episode. This is the two that I had that she drew. This is the one that I've done, the strange pilot, and this is pirate, and this is another kind of evil starburst. So that's the one I'm going to do right now, and that's the one that's going to go into the next clock. So I'm going to transfer this onto my backing fabric. Now, the way that I'm going to do that, incidentally, this is the hard cardboard I use, not regular cardboard. This is really hard cardboard that I use to wrap my thing around. If you're going to make a finished piece and put it in some kind of a frame, any shape of a frame, use something really hard. So I'm going to get ready to transfer here, and I'm going to take you with me. Move the clocks over. First, let me say the way that I'm going to transfer this is with netting. So this is netting. Now, netting can be easily confused. This is from Joann's Fabric, Michael's, any craft store. This is just netting. That's what it's called. It doesn't have a fancy name, just netting. And it's less than $1 a yard, and it's doubled up like most material on a bolt, so it's very easy to find and very cheap to buy. You can easily confuse this with tulle, Tulle, which is like the ballet tutu material. And I would not use tulle. I would use netting. And the reason I would use netting is because when you're standing there at Michael's or Joann's or whatever, and you see a bolt of netting, which is quite coarse, and the holes are very, very big, and then you see the tulle next to it, the tulle is much, much smaller, finer, and softer. The problem with the tulle is that when you trace onto your design, the tulle is so tight that you get a lot of information onto the netting, but once you transfer it onto your paper, not a lot of information onto the paper. Because it's so dense, the Sharpie cannot make its way through in enough places to relay the information that you have drawn on here onto the backing fabric. That's going to make sense in a minute. So let's get going with this. Little face flew away, but that's okay. I'm going to do this very in a shoddy manner because this is just a tutorial and this is just a clock. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a piece of netting that's going to fit my face here. We're going to get a little bit closer in a second so you know exactly what I'm up to. So this is going to be my face. I don't need a huge piece. I'm just going to cut it. Doesn't have to be square, doesn't have to be perfect. Can be a mess, but just make sure it's big enough so that you can trace your design. All done with this. I got my netting, that's set. So now the next thing that I would do, you know what, let's make life easy, and I'm gonna cut that with that. Let's get this off here so you're only looking at one design. The next thing I would do is take my netting, get it over here. I always put a few pins in it just to be sure. I put pins as close to the frame or inside the frame as I can. This is so small, I'm not really, you know what, let's do it. Let's pin it right here on the face. I pin it in some places just to make sure that that it's not slipping when I'm about to trace it. This is a very small piece. Your pieces are often going to be bigger, and you're going to end up with giant pieces of netting, and you're going to need to pin them down quite well. And when you're finished with them, you probably want to roll them up on a tube or something like that, or something flat like a bolt thing or a piece of cardboard. Just roll them up and store them if you plan to go back to them. This is a very itty bitty one just for the sake of showing. Now I can use my regular Sharpie to trace on here. I am. This is just a plain old Sharpie. This isn't a rub-a-dub or an industrial or anything like that. I am now just tracing this pattern to capture the lines. Okay. So I'm going to do the circle so I know the line inside which I should be hooking. And I'm going to give it kind of this is going to kill your Sharpie, so be prepared for that. Use your old Sharpies for this part, but make sure they're still good and inky. Make sure your lines are really, really there. You know, you can see on your netting already that some of it's blacked out. Let me get the whole thing captured. I'm going to be really careful as I'm going. I can see, you can't see from where you are, but you will see when you're leaning over it like this. You can see that the lines are getting blacked out. And I'm right on target with being precise, with being careful. I'm just putting the essential information on here. This will take a long time when you have a larger pattern. And sometimes you'll say to yourself, gosh, this is so many lines. Am I going to be able to read this to sort of translate it onto the backing fabric when it comes time to trace? The question always becomes, if your pattern, like with any pattern with rug hooking, if your pattern becomes so busy that transferring it is almost impossible, you have to question furthermore whether you're going to be able to even hook it. So if you've got a pattern that is so complex and minute and detailed, like an Edward Gorey type, very, very busy picture, and you're going to yourself, how am I going to capture this onto the netting? You should be saying to yourself also, maybe this design is a little bit overcomplicated and maybe I need to simplify it, because hooking it at that point is going to be a problem. Oh, I almost forgot the strange lips. All right. There we go. So let's see what we've got. I might have forgotten. Put my pins away for now. Let's see what we've got. I'm going to take the drawing out. Let's see what we're left with. So you can see it's very faint. Whoop, and it's very airy. It's very faint, but it's going to be enough information for me to translate it onto this in terms of tracing it next. So if I want, I can touch it up more. I could say to myself, you know what, that eye, not quite right. I'm going to line it back up. And I'm going to try this again. Let me just give the eye another pass. There we go. The eye is a little bit more defined. So I'm going to put this over here for now so that I can see it and refer to it as I trace. Now, if you are, I do most of my patterns on linen, unless I'm working with yarn and stuff, and then I have to think about it. When I'm tracing on linen, which I'm going to do in a minute, I'm going to pull a little scrap off of this because this is such a small piece. I'll probably pull this scrap. When I'm tracing on linen, it's going to be a little bit tricky. Now, you can see the pattern, but it's a little bit darker than if I was planning on tracing it onto monk's cloth. So I'm just going to show you that as an example. Just take a piece of monk's cloth. Now, if I were putting it on here, be a little bit more easygoing. Just because of the white background, it's a little bit easier. It is not impossible or difficult, no matter what you choose. The other one's on linen. I can see that I have some small scrappy pieces of linen, so I'm going to choose linen to put the second one on as well. And I'm going to cut a really small piece. I usually don't cut small pieces, but I know I'm going to hook it quickly, and I'm just going to back it the same way I backed the last one. So I'm going to put you on hold for a second while I cut my linen. I'm sure this is a process that you're used to, but I'm going to look for a piece that I can cut when I find my little snipper and pull it out and then cut it that way. And this even has a seam through it, which I would never sell that commercially because there's a giant seam running through it. I would never sell a pattern to anybody that had that. So I might as well use that myself because I don't mind a bit. I'm going to put you on pause for just a second while I cut this linen. Now, I know you know this already, but I'm just going to show it anyway because I'm right here. I've just literally clipped my linen into the square that I want, and I've clipped a strand at the end of where I want it to end, and I'm just pulling out that one strand, and that gives me a nice little line. I know you know this, but some of you might not. A nice little gap where I can see clearly to cut perfectly straight. If I was doing something for a kit or one of my own patterns that had to be absolutely perfect, I would be doing this to make sure that when I drew the kit up, it was nice and square and that all your square lines in your framing was absolutely perfect because that matters hugely. Now, what I'm going to do when we're all done with this is go upstairs and serge or do many zigzags around the edge of my linen so it doesn't fray. You definitely don't want it to fray. You can see it, how badly it wants to do that. So I'll be finishing the edges of this later, but right now we're just tracing. So here comes Drunken Sun right onto the middle of the pattern. It's a little bit hard to see, so we'll do our best. And I'm going to pin it again, just a few strategic pins. I'll put this one right across his snout again so that I know I've got one right central that's holding the whole show together there. And it looks very faint. It looks less faint the more times, like if you're selling your pattern, it looks less faint every time. Like here's one of my nettings of my February pattern that I did for our Facebook group of the Conversation Hearts. And I traced it quite a few times and it became darker and darker and darker. You see how that would then be very easy to deal with. First time out of the gate, you're working with a very faint outline. Unless you want to sit for a while, add some time to the whole shebang and trace it many more times. With something this small, I don't really need to. I can see it well enough. Oh my gosh, you know what? Breaking one of the cardinal rules right here. Did you see that? I'm going to get my industrial Sharpies out because it's hitting the fabric. When it's on the fabric, when it's on the paper, use your regular Sharpies. But when it's on the fabric, use your industrials so that it doesn't, there's some stuff inside the regular Sharpie that can eat away on your backing, but not inside the industrials. These replace the rubber dubs from years ago. So I'm just tracing my circle for myself first. It's well pinned, so I'm not worried about any slipping. Okay, and now I'm looking at the face, the shape of the face. I can just about see it. Now, the reason it's so faint is because the netting, because it's so open, right? The surface of it is so open, there's not a lot of information on it. You can't get that many lines on it. So it is tempting to use tulle, but don't use tulle, because if I were using tulle now, there are so many small holes that your Sharpie can't get into the hole to get the ink on the backing fabric. So what you need is the more open netting, because yes, there's less information to look at and to put down, and yes, you need to refer to your picture more often to be sure that you're doing it right. But at the same time, you'll see when I finish this and lift this off, there will be a lot of information on the backing fabric, and that's really where it needs to be. So I've got that face on there. Now I've got this weird shut eye. Oh, my little girl, she's such a kook. All right. And getting this eye in. I am happy to have the drunken face and the pirate face, because she normally just draws poops for me to hook. And yeah, I'm not that into that. I'm an older mom and I don't have such a sense of humor anymore. So I've got the face nailed down, and now I'm gonna start putting these swirls in. And again, I can just about see my lines. I'm referring constantly to this one too. This is like this. I haven't got really great light either. But I think it's gonna be enough. She will let me know if it's not enough. She finds the strangest things that are even a tiny bit wrong, and she certainly lets me know. Okay, so I forgot about this line. This is like going up here, and then it does like this. That must be a collar of some sort. Only the artist knows. I certainly don't. There. And what have we got? One more. Yep, this is something here. And this is something here. And we're getting there. Oh, where's that? That's here. And then this is like very subtle. So let me just cross reference that. I feel like the eyes are a little bit close together, so I'm going to fix that later. Maybe this one just comes more like that. I'm sure my tracing wasn't quite perfect either, but it looks quite good. So I'm going to go ahead and unpin it. And pretty good. So this is certainly enough information for me to go forward with this. And I just want to show you this now that it has 2 layers of ink. It is a bit brighter. I mean, you can see that it is more well defined. The contrast is better between the black and the white. You can see it better. Again, with rug hooking, whether it's primitive or not, you need fairly simple lines. You know, you rarely see any kind of a backing, you know, even if it's like a pearl McGowan, you rarely see something that's super, 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 super liney and complicated. Some of the pearl McGowans, yeah, you get the covered bridge and the Currier and Ives type scenes, and they are quite detailed. But in general, you get line drawings, and they're not overcomplicated. So just think to yourself, if you have something more complicated than this, which I'm sure you will, just think to yourself, what are the most important lines that I need to get in there? And what lines can I add after we're at this stage and I'm filling it in? Can I put down this much detail and then add detail freehand, referring to my original drawing afterward? Would that work too? Because as you can see, compared to using a light box or doing something on your wall and putting your back out, this is quite fast, easy, and I've used about 2 cents worth of netting. And I've used a tiny bit of my Sharpie ink. This is this works well. This is a good technique. If you want to do it more than once, or you're doing a series, or you're giving one as a gift, or you're making more to sell, or whatever, you might want to return to it. It's good to have it on netting because you know it'll be there for you exactly the same way, and it will come out exactly the same way too. So there we go. That's about as good as it gets. I mean, it looks just like this. I'm going to hook it when I put on tonight's Miss Marple, and it'll be in the clock along with the other one. And it's super easy, I think. I hope that you found that it was easy. I hope I'm not forgetting any sort of essential information that I should be telling you. But yeah, using this technique, you're just going to the craft store and getting netting and using whatever background that you chose. And just remember, the darker your linen or burlap, the harder it gets to see. So make sure, I've got my light over here to do this video, but make sure you've got your light right down over that, and you know that you're getting the best light you can to see the contrast in the netting of the black against the white. And it should go really well, really easily. This is a technique that professional people use to sell commercial patterns. So if you're not having it printed somewhere, this is probably what you're doing to get your pattern onto your backing. It is easy, it's fast, you're sitting down, it's more ergonomically correct than doing something against the wall or the window. So give it a shot. It's certainly something that you can do. Let me know if you have any questions or comments, and if you need more information, I'm always happy to put it into the thread. If you like these videos that I've been doing, I should say, please like and subscribe, because they go sharing on Facebook, and I love that they get out there, but it's hard for me to see how many people are actually looking at them. And I saw one of them yesterday had like 160 collective likes, and I had no idea. So if people indeed are watching these, I would love to make more doing stuff like this, especially during this crazy time. Showing you basic techniques, how to get better and how to do more parts of the rug hooking process yourself. All of my videos will always be about rug hooking or supplies for rug hooking, dyeing, things that have to do with hooking or braiding or punch needle. So you'll never get anything that's crazy from my feed. It will always be something to do with rug hooking. Thanks for watching, and see you soon. Bye.